Despite all the missions, guilds, money sinks, and ship balance mechanics we saw at the Star Citizen 1.0 panel during CitizenCon, you know what we never heard about? Logging on and off. And that doesn't seem like a coincidence anymore. Even just last week, a question about logging on and off was only answered in regards to medical respawns. Logging on and off is a contentious mechanic with a long history of speculation, stated function, ramifications, and justifications for interesting designs that don't seem to be the way going forward anymore. Remember agent smithing?
No agent smithing. Put that one to bed.
Yeah, that's 2018. But there's a lot of questions we need answered. Will multiple players be able to log on and off on a single ship? Will players be able to respawn away from cities, habs, and beds? Will friends be allowed to respawn at our player bases? Why doesn't multi-crew spawning work anymore? For some reason, none of these questions have really fully been answered. But after we did get a little nugget of information that ended up being a bombshell talking about beds not being the sole respawn location in the game anymore.
In fact, in the future, we want no matter where you log out, that's where you log back in.
We've basically gotten nothing. So today I'm going to explain to you how this spawn system was supposed to work up until it was all flipped on its head earlier this year, and hopefully make a case for us getting a little more information. Thank you for coming to my Tomato Talk. Logging off has been such a weird topic with Star Citizen. The way most players understand it, and the way it's theoretically worked since 3.0 in 2017, is you can hop into a ship bed and use the interaction system to go to sleep, logging you off so you can log right back in that location later on. This was the dream for many, literally. Not only was it how players wanted it exactly to work, so they could venture out into space and start off wherever they wanted, skipping the city grind at the beginning of each session, but it was also the dream in the sense that it almost never worked. You'd have to make sure you were so far from everybody else, that your ship had its landing gear down, that you were actually on a planet's surface, or that you weren't on a planet's surface but actually hovering 200 meters above it. Upside down. All kinds of weird things were required to get you to be able to make this work, to the point where you never really knew if it functioned or not, and most people then never tried. Regardless, many players have used bed logouts and still do to this day, and at this point they seem to work fairly well outside of a few situations. I've been using them too, and I suggest really anybody who wants to skip that beginning of your session grind, try using your bed logouts on your ship. And up until this year, I think just about anybody who knew about this thought this is how it would always be. You can even go back to the stretch goals and find the hibernation mode stretch goal at 14 million, which talked about logging on and off from your ship by hitting the bunk. There is a vibrant history of this functionality being discussed and marketed throughout the years. I'll point you towards my feature watch earlier this year to learn more about that stretch goal and all the marketing that's gone into pushing the idea behind it. The point is, this wasn't some side feature. This is one of the most important parts of the game. Like, this is unarguably a feature that affects every single player that ever plays. So when over the last couple of years players started realizing they couldn't log on or off from other players' ships or their own ships when other players were aboard, it was not taken lightly. This started to set off quite a bit of anxiety and brought up questions about how multi-crew was meant to be working and if bed logging was changing and what was going on. And CIG kept silent about the whole thing over the last couple of years, until finally in May of 2024, after some comments on Spectrum heated up the discussion a little bit more, the topic finally came up in Star Citizen Live in a pretty high-level discussion.
We've seen a hot take about bed logging not fitting the vision of what Star Citizen is going to be. Care to elaborate on what you're thinking about doing with bed logging and how logging in and out will look in the future?
I'm not sure what that hot take is, but we're definitely in favor of bed logging. In fact, in the future, we plan to give the player buffs for getting a good night's sleep in bed, and have that be part of the game loop. But we don't want to limit the player to that. It's like having a bed shouldn't be a requirement to log out of the game. In fact, in the future, we want no matter where you log out, that's where you log back in. You have all the same missions, like we want your place in the universe to be persistent no matter where you log out.
So that's a pretty big change, and just like that, the idea behind beds in ships, which ships have beds, which ships are meant for long range, it all gets mixed up, and a whole new set of questions are introduced. most important question is probably the most obvious. If players are going to be able to log out and in anywhere, then when? Because this would likely make all the difference for some players. While you can currently log off and on from ships to shorten your playtime, many players just don't. And I'm not sure why, and would love to hear actually from you guys in the comments why that might be, but the fact is, Star Citizen has not adequately communicated to people that this is an option, so many people don't play the game because of the logging mechanics. This could be a big change for that. Another obvious question though is, what are those buffs that players are going to get when they do use beds in this new system? We know the player stamina and health system will be running deep in this game, but how much can you really incentivize people to use beds to the point of still making them matter on ships? Speaking of ships, how will you stop 200 players from logging off on a Pisces, then flying that Pisces aboard an Idris, and having each player log on over time? And what if that Pisces is stored when I go to log back on? There are some obvious solutions to some of these questions, like leaving the player character in place to represent them, such as in other games like Satisfactory. But it's still strange to me how little the logging on and off and death mechanics were talked about when it came to the 1.0 discussion. Even in regards to base building, which was the topic of last week's Star Citizen Live, it has come up. Somebody managed to ask a question about logging on and off from yours or your friend's bases. Here's the answer.
Can you spawn in your base or group bed log?
Right now, the intention is that if you have a med bed or if you have an hospital area in your base, you can use the imprint system there and then use this as your gathering point as the group.
The focus was just about respawning. It's almost like the logging on and off part of the question was just completely ignored. I don't know if there's a reason for them not to talk about the logging on and off, or maybe they haven't finalized their designs enough to feel confident talking about it, but I do hope they figure that out soon because I think this is a pretty key part of the game that people would love to know about and understand more about going forward. It also kind of makes the difference between what kind of ship you'll buy. And honestly, I'm a bit sad to see the significance of bed logging decrease. I think that offered some real tangible benefits to those ships, and I think there are ways to still allow this sort of freedom to players while still maintaining the status quo of a bed logout. Cause don't get me wrong, I see the obvious benefit of allowing players to spawn in and out anywhere. This will make the game hugely more popular and easy to play, but I think it's at the expense of choice and consequence, so hear me out. What if we still limited respawns to beds, but players were able to craft small portable beds for themselves? This would take up some inventory space and some resources to make, but act as a mobile respawn point that also physically represented you in space and stayed there while you were offline. This could then even tie into base building and some sort of camping mechanic for the explorers, nomads, and folks living on the frontier. This system offers a reason to prepare your kit for your gameplay style and allows you some extra benefits from planning ahead, or giving you consequences for not doing so. It benefits better equipped vehicles that have beds, or at least more space for you to sleep in. And it's a method of logging on and off that you can do anywhere you go. While I unfortunately think this might still be more advanced than I think CIG is willing to put on something as crucial as logging on and off, and there could be some holes in this approach, I do hope maybe we could see something interesting tied into the mechanic itself. As of now, I think our most likely near-term update on logging mechanics in-game just passed last week. I'm guessing we won't hear much about this until at least Q2 of next year, and what we do here will likely be done in an accessible way for as many players as possible, as that seems to be the direction that a lot of Star Citizen's headed in. Though I hope it offers us choice and consequence, however they do it. If you want to hear what that update might be when it does come, I'd suggest subscribing here, because I'll be covering it for you as well as the rest of the game's development. And consider checking out my other channels for gameplay, podcasts, and longer form videos. They'll pop up for you after the video is done if you want to check them out. Thank you for watching this video, I hope you learned something from it, and I'll catch you in the next.